So a strong message of continuity there from Minister Vaishnav, right? But events never go as planned. Things come from here and there and blow us off course as individuals and, of course, as governments. So what in practice does the next 5 years, Modi 3.0, mean? What will it mean for India's economic and foreign policy? I'm delighted now to welcome to the stage our esteemed panelists, Sanjeev, Sanyal, member of the Economic Advisory Council to the PM. He's been at the center of economic policy making for the last 10 years. Where are you, Mr. Sanyal? Come on up and join us. Come this side, okay, wherever you like, come on up. And Dr. Vijay Chauthaiwale, who's in charge of the Foreign Affairs Department of the BJP, really a foreign affairs guru and thinker of our times. Come on, Dr. Vijay, make yourselves comfortable. Where are you? Okay. So I'm going to start with Sanjeev Sanyal, if I may. Strong message of continuity there from Minister Vaishnav. But the election results, let's be honest, were not exactly as you wanted. There was a swing away from the BJP. And some people, some investors are worried that this might have an impact on economic policy, especially on macro-financial stability and consistency. How do you respond?
So let me be clear that we are at an amazing tipping point in India's economic history, where we have reached a critical mass where the compounding process of growth is not just of impact on India, obviously it is, but also beginning to be on global scale. So let me sort of illustrate this compounding process, because everybody knows it happens, but you have to near the numbers. So when India began to liberalize its economy in 1991, India's nominal GDP in USD terms was just 260 billion. Okay? It took us 16 years from there on to reach our first $1 trillion GDP level, which happened in 2007-8. Then it took us 5 years to add the next $1 trillion. So by 2014-15, we became a $2 trillion economy. From there, it should have taken us 5 years, but it actually took us 7 years because we lost 2 years in COVID. So it was as recently as 2021-22 that we became a $3 trillion economy. Then it took us just 3 years to become, this year, a $4 trillion economy. And in another 24 months odd, we will become a $4 trillion economy. And at that, we will hit it in 24 months, a $5 trillion economy.
So are you saying the timelines are now shrinking to such an extent that the momentum is built in?
Absolutely. So by the time we become a $5 trillion economy in 2027, we will be the world's third largest economy. So you can see this momentum is dramatically building up. But the key point here is that this is about sustaining compounding. Consistency. So, you know, last year we did 8.2% GDP growth rate. This year we'll do a little over 7%. That's what's expected. Now, all we need to do is basically keep doing this. Because if we keep doing this, by 2047, we will be a $30 to $31 trillion economy. So compounding is very powerful. That's how China got here. China's economy was
Absolutely.
30 years ago, China's economy and our economy are the same size. Therefore, very importantly, macroeconomic stability. There is always a demand sometimes, yeah, why don't we just push for it through fiscal means or push the banking system to expand a bit faster and so on? Bad idea. Because this is about keeping this compounding process going. So even at the height of COVID, you will remember, we in India were very restrained in our fiscal and monetary response. Yes, we did what was necessary for the poor and to keep MSMEs and so on going, but we didn't blow the bank up for this. Similarly, we have spent a lot of effort cleaning up our banking system. I have absolutely no intention of going through yet another banking cleanup ever in my life, but very, very important that we do that. Similarly, look at our foreign exchange reserves. We now have more foreign exchange reserves than external debt. India is actually a small net creditor country to the rest of the world. The point I'm making to you is keep compounding, and because the world is an uncertain place, build all kinds of buffers in the system so that we don't get thrown off course.
So systematic, stable, consistent. That's what I took away, ladies and gentlemen. What did you? Perhaps put it on social media, #IGF. Let's move to foreign policy for a moment. Dr. Vijay, I was really surprised to see that there was foreign policy mention on the campaign trail in the Indian election, right? Now, this never happens. It hasn't happened in the UK in this campaign currently. It hardly ever happens in India. And it seemed to go down quite well with voters. What do you make of that?
See, historically, foreign policy was discussed among common people, and especially during elections, was only pertaining to our western neighbor, Pakistan, and that too with respect to the terrorism. But what has happened in last 10 years is, as I call it, as a democratization of India's foreign policy. That means today on a person who is a street chai vendor also has an opinion and he is aware of India's foreign policy. The great credit of this transformation definitely goes to Prime Minister Modi, who has made foreign policy as is one of the, I would say, one of the tallest endpoint in his tenure. And his personal engagement with world leaders, the initiatives that this government has taken place, and also his personal chemistry with the world leaders.
And India standing tall on the world stage
Yes.
seems to be a very popular thing.
Very popular.
Huh?
And therefore, looks like, see the way India has celebrated G20 event. It is unprecedented. India has raised bar to such a high height that actually Brazilian Prime Minister has accepted it, that it's very difficult to replicate India's way to organize G20. And many more. And therefore, people on the ground are seeing the impact of it. The value of Indian passport has gone up. The way India has handled COVID crisis, especially not only for itself, but also for the many part of the world, and how India has supported many countries who were more vulnerable in getting access to the medicines, to the vaccines. So India's humanitarian effect, humanitarian efforts, the way India is doing a very niche handling the global crisis, such as Ukraine, Russia, or Gaza, Israel, all these are accumulated, and therefore foreign policy has become a matter of discussion in Indian psyche.
Yeah, which is, to my mind, a huge surprise, and actually a really good thing. Sanjeev, Sanyal, so let's talk about how you continue the momentum of growth, which is so vital. The last 10 years have seen a remarkable record of growth, high levels of growth, huge construction boom and an infrastructure boom, as we heard from Minister Vaishnav. What hasn't really taken place on scale and as hoped was a manufacturing takeoff, a liftoff, as it were. Now, I know that you personally are closely involved in trying to unjam these jammed up procedures. Minister Vaishnav talked about all these obsolete laws that are being torn up, yeah? So can you tell us about what you are doing now to try and make life easier for both Indian and outside businesses that want to invest in making things in India?
So let me say very clearly that we are unapologetic supply-siders in that we believe that India's growth requires continuous efforts to reform and build. There's nothing sort of natural about rapid economic growth. You have to keep investing into it. So what are the investments you need? First of all, you need to upgrade India's infrastructure. So you heard some of the efforts being done. We are dramatically changing, laying out highways, airports, ports. If you go to Mumbai, you'll see cranes everywhere. In fact, Mumbai right now is the highest concentration of cranes anywhere in the world. So there is a huge amount of infrastructure being built. That's obviously needed for manufacturing. Secondly, we are doing, getting rid of a large number of bureaucratic and other hassles that used to, and still does to some extent, constrain India's.
So give us an example.
So one good example of something that I am personally working on is patents. Just 7 years ago,
did you say?
patents,
Right.
intellectual property. Just 7 years ago, India used to only do 9,980 patents a year. Okay? Today, the last financial year, we did 103,000 patents. That's the number we granted.
Wow. So that's a what,
That's
12-fold increase
yeah,
or something?
yeah, in 7 years, more than 10 times increase.
And what impact do you hope something like that will have now?
So this is just one thing.
Intellectual work is being done. How does that translate into growth?
So what happens is that you suddenly make it radically easier to do business in India, right? So supposing if you were into cutting-edge technology, and you're trying to patent something, it takes you 5-7 years to get your patent. Look, technology moves on.
Yeah,
we are now among the fastest places to do technological changes. Similarly, another thing, since this is all about creative destruction, shutting down a company, right? May seem like, everybody loves ease of entry, but for a healthy economy, you need ease of exit. It used to take years to shut down a company in India, even when all the paperwork had been done and everybody agreed that this had to be shut down. And I'm not talking here about bankruptcy. This is our natural shutting down of companies, which is common. But 90% of companies are voluntarily shut down. It used to take up to 4 years to shut it down. We made a bunch of changes in the procedure. The average company shutdown for a voluntary shutdown is only 90 days, which is the fastest in the world.
Wow.
So we are doing lots of these kinds of changes.
So you have to get that message out, right? Because I don't think most people are aware of that.
These are nuts and bolts changes, very boring.
What about customs? And the customs procedures in India are notoriously slow and, headache-inducing.
So there are two things. One is just the physical infrastructure, rapidly being upgraded. Two, I'll just show you how minor things can have huge impact. So we had made large parts of this system of customs paperless, okay? But each part in it, for some reason, did not talk to the other part. So you did it all paperless, then you printed it all out, went to the next stage, loaded it all into the system and so on. There were 3 such steps. Now, all we needed to do, and imagine this is the world's IT hub, and this was how it was, till just, a year ago, connected them through, and you can see how fast, suddenly you literally remove several days from the process. And so in this way, we are rapidly smoothing out these things. So, for example, in our airports, for Bangalore Airport, for example, the export of a product, from the time it turns up at the airport to the time it takes off, is between 3 to 6 hours, which is faster than anything in China also. Wow. So our seaports now need to be that level of efficiency.
And so let's hope you can bring all that together to keep the growth going.
Absolutely. Growth is all about...
I just want to bring Dr. Vijay in at this point. Dr. Vijay, something that's been puzzling me is how India has somehow managed to do this kind of extraordinary diplomatic dance, I'm going to call it, managing to build its relationship with Russia on the one hand and America on the other hand, who are barely speaking to each other, without really making concessions to either side. What's going on? How has it pulled that out, and is that sustainable?
So historically, during Cold War, India used to have this policy of non-alignment, which essentially was a passive policy, that between the fight of two giants, it's better to India remain aloof. What has changed now that India is willing and actively pursuing engagement with practically everyone who matters. And that, what they call it as a multilateralism, is not only on paper, but also it is serving, number one, India's interest. For example, all of you know, and you have, almost all of you must have heard what Dr. Jaishankar has said when he was asked that why you are buying oil from Russia. And we know that if we don't buy oil from Russia, and Sanjeev can tell more about it, that the oil prices would have gone to the unsustainable level, unaffordable level to India. And also it would have impacted adversely the oil prices globally because over-dependence on few countries. And that is precisely what India has done as far as oil from Russia is concerned. But at the same time, Prime Minister has said that war is not, this is not the era of war, very clearly giving the message. Similarly, in Gaza-Israel conflict, Prime Minister has said that yes, 7th October attack was a terrorist attack, but at the same time, the civilian casualties should be minimized and humanitarian aid can go unhindered. And third is the long-term solution is a two-state policy. So India has made its positions very clear, and therefore it may not be liked by everyone, but everyone appreciates it.
But some people may be scratching their heads, thinking to themselves,
Absolutely, yeah.
how long can you manage to ride two horses like this? You know,
It's not why you are talking only two horses.
right?
India will ride multiple horses. Because that is the way it has to be. And therefore, if you see, India is a member of G20. It is now almost permanent invitee of G7. India is a very important partner in Quad. But at the same time, India is also an important member of SCO and BRICS.
But there's always the risk, isn't there, Dr. Vijay, that you could jeopardize the very important relationship with the US. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you make sure it doesn't backfire?
I doubt that perception is correct. US has actually encouraged when we started buying oil from Russia, and they understood it. And if you see the statements, they never talked about it. There were much more reservations from the European side. I agree with you. But the thing is that the world has accepted that India is not going to be focused on one country or one region, but they will do, and therefore India's interests are going to be the primary driver as far as India's foreign policy is concerned. And at the same time, they are doing a lot of good for the rest of the world. India's initiative on Global South, India's insistence, African Union has become the member of G20 first time, and you must have seen the reaction of African representatives during G20 summit in Delhi. What India has done in the vaccine diplomacy, India provided vaccine to 90 countries. Some major part of has gone free. India has provided medicines. And therefore, what India is doing for the global good is also appreciated, because it is not possible for any one country to do all these things. So India is also contributing to its share, sometimes beyond whatever is expected from it, and it is appreciated. And therefore, this India's apparently divergent positions on various global matters are well understood for majority of the world.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vijay. I'm going to put one final question, and I think I'll put it to Sanjeev Sanyal. So make it concrete for us. Paint a picture for us then. What will doing business in India look like in 5 years' time? How is it going to be easier? How is it going to be transformed?
So first of all, we will provide you with world-class infrastructure. The best there is, we will provide you. We obviously have a large domestic market. People don't realize that till we introduced the GST, we were actually divided into small markets. So we, of course, signed a free trade agreement with ourselves, which was the unified market through the GST. So you now have a unified market. We have the world's largest workforce by the end of this decade, and increasingly more skilled, because as we are getting into new areas, in fact, there are areas where we are at the cutting edge. Many of the chips you use are actually designed in India. We will now begin manufacturing those chips also in India. So there are many areas we have a high skill, large domestic market, high quality infrastructure, and increasingly we are getting rid of all these tiny irritants, which we recognize got in the way of doing business in India, and we recognize that. So they may still be there, but one change at a time, nuts and bolts are being fixed, and doing business in India is becoming radically easier than it used to be in the past.
So that mass manufacturing economic model that took China out of extreme poverty, has the bus gone by for India, do you think? Does India have to find a different economic model?
So it'll be a little bit different. First of all, remember, when we are going through this phase, services is tradable in a way that wasn't 20 years ago. So we will use that because it plays to our strength. So services will be a much bigger part of our story than was in China. But for manufacturing as well, we will be a part of the global supply chain. There is one issue, however, which is an issue really with the rest of the world. Unfortunately, demand growth in the rest of the world has not been very strong for several years now, particularly in Europe. And so there is a major market that is not growing. Even though the US is growing, it's sort of growing in a faltering sort of way. So in that environment, obviously, it is not easy for us to kind of do the same thing that China did. And in fact, even last year's 8% GDP growth rate was almost entirely domestically driven, very little contribution from exports. So we are being forced to do it in our own way. But the world goes through cycles. There will be a time when Europe and the North Atlantic will begin growing faster. And we are quite confident at that stage we will grow at 10% because we'll be able to export. But meanwhile, what we need to do is to build up our own strengths, build the capacities, build the skills, build the infrastructure, make sure those systems are in place to take advantage of the cycles. Even China invested for many, many years, got its act together, then it got a great run in the 2000s for about 7-8 years. That's when it really took off. But we have to be ready for those things to happen because things go in cycles. That cycle point will come too for us as well. And
Absolutely.
At that time, we will do it. But
it's being consistent and being nimble at the same time.
Absolutely.
That's the great art, isn't
Yes.
it? Sanjeev, Sanyal, Dr. Vijay, Chauthaiwale, it's been such a pleasure having you with us at India Global Forum 2024.
Thank you very much.